Our topic tonight is embracing the consequences. By the way, my name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. We've been on since 2011, hard to believe. And tonight's program is one that we haven't actually presented this in a little while, and I'm really glad that we're getting to this because we all know that there are some very unwanted outcomes related to substance use disorder. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the things that can be very positive that come out of this very negative disorder that happens to so many of our loved ones. I am the parent of somebody in long-term recovery, and we had all kinds of things that were unthinkable, this new normal that we had in our lives. And so there were a lot of things that happened that were very unpleasant that actually turned out. I got a new career. My son's 14 years in recovery, doing well, married, living a great life. We have a family in recovery, so thank goodness for that. So just want to tell you a little bit. First of all, we want to thank the Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol because they have been a longtime partner and supporter of ours. They are funding this program and hopefully many more to come. You can follow up on tonight's program on our website. Our website has loads and loads of information, more than 100 pages of content. One of them is conversation.zone/addiction. And that is where you'll find this recording and any resources that our presenters might be sharing tonight. We'll try to include as much supportive information on that follow-up page as possible. So I am so excited to introduce you to our speakers tonight. So first, I will tell you about Judge Stephen O'Neill. Judge O'Neill was sworn in on July 29th of 2002 as the 70th judge for the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas. Judge O'Neill presides over the Drug Treatment Court and serves as the administrative judge of all treatment courts and is the Adult Probation Court liaison. In April of 2006, Judge O'Neill started the Montgomery County Drug Treatment Court. The program presently has, maybe this has been updated, but this is the bio that we have, 75 participants and 798 graduates since 2007. Montgomery County Drug Court is part of a network of more than 4,000 drug courts provided nationwide that serve approximately 145,000 seriously addicted individuals in the criminal justice system. Judge O'Neill is past president of the Pennsylvania Association of Treatment Court Professionals and is currently serving on the association's executive committee. He's a member of the Drug DUI Court Accreditation Panel for the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts and also currently serves as a member of the faculty of the National Drug Court Institute and has both attended and presented at numerous trainings throughout the country. We're in very good hands tonight. Also want to introduce you to Megan Morrison, who is the Deputy Chief of Treatment Courts, which is responsible for the daily operations of the Montgomery County Treatment Courts Department. And finally, we also have with us Samantha Osterloff, who is the Director of Marketing for Ethos Treatment. Throughout her career in behavioral health care, Samantha has held a wide range of roles, including behavioral health technician, co-facilitator of family programming, counselor assistant, aftercare coordinator, and various business development positions. Samantha attributes her expertise not only to her academic achievements, but also to the opportunities she's had to expand her skill set across different aspects of behavioral health care. Samantha is a certified recovery specialist and certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, also a certified family recovery specialist. In addition to her professional work, Samantha has a passion for teaching and has taken on various adjunct teaching positions. Okay, wow, what a great set of speakers. So I'm going to turn it over to Judge O'Neill, and I think Megan Morrison is also going to be speaking. Is that right, together?
Yes, Megan and I are kind of a team. We've been at this for a long time. And again, I am each and every time that there becomes an opportunity for community outreach, that is part of the what we call the best practices of a drug treatment court. Remembering that any drug treatment court always is based upon evidence-based practices. One of those practices is for court members to reach out into the community, not only directly into the community of those that are justice involved with a substance use disorder, but most importantly, those affected, those being stakeholders in the community, but most importantly, and what is really closest to my heart are the families, the loved ones, the people that are so deeply affected by the substance use disorders of their loved ones. So I have talked to this group. I was just remarking to Kim when we first came on that I had been at the treatment courts for a number of years and never really understood, other than Al-Anon and traditional peer support groups for those affected, that this partnership existed. And I was completely floored when I was invited to come and talk to real parents undergoing the real issues of what to do when your loved one has a substance use disorder. I will try to use throughout this presentation or this talk substance use disorder. The nomenclature, our dialogue around it, reserve the right to call themselves an addict if they wish, but it has become quite a pejorative, at least through the criminal justice system and mostly in our society. So it is, if we're going to treat it like the disease it is, then we should treat it such as that with a person with a substance use disorder. Occasionally, I'll use the term addiction, never the term addict, because that is a true pejorative. And so even hearing a judge beginning to speak about, addiction, substance use disorder as a disease, as a disorder, already is changing the conversation. And that's what I set out to do almost 20 years ago. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary. I always, talk to the community about what were we presented with. I had been a district attorney back when the earth was still cooling back in the 80s, then went on to become a private defense attorney. I was involved in politics and I moved up to become the county solicitor, but I wanted to be a judge. I thought that old hackneyed cliche of, can you make a difference? And some of my judicial mentors as a trial attorney, some were people that I looked up to. And I had that opportunity to become a judge back in 2002. And when I started, I was initially in the family division, and I started to see a lot of the family issues that we're dealing with, and seeing substance use disorders begin to rear its ugly face in custody cases. And I said, well, what is this? We keep talking about this, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it. When I was elevated to the criminal courts, for the first couple of years, I started to look and say, why am I seeing the same faces come back? Why are they coming back on probation? Why are they violating their probation? Why are they not showing up? And I started to find the common denominator was, back then we called it addiction. And that common denominator, I said, well, there has to be something. Why are we, trying to punish away the crime or the individual through the crimes they commit? Why are we so crime oriented in terms of protecting the community? That's what it traditionally stands for. And I said, there has to be a different way. If you start to approach actually what is underlying the criminal behavior symptoms, you would have a better shot than thinking that by incarcerating individuals for longer and longer periods of time as they recidivate, where they come back in the criminal justice system, you're not getting anywhere. That about 70% of them that, come in, maybe get on probation, don't do any treatment, don't do anything, they recidivate, meaning they have new arrests or they will come back through probation violations. And, most people didn't look at it. The stakeholders didn't care because, unless you're personally affected by somebody with a substance use disorder, then you have no real reason to get involved. The community, you want to keep your community safe. And if they're going to lock people up, to stop them from, breaking into your cars and boosting baby formula out of Rite Aids and burglarizing your house and driving under the influence and, just possessing of the drugs, wasn't really a concern. That coincided exactly with the wonderful Sackler family that, hit on a notion that we can actually begin to make people believe that opioids are the savior in terms of those who suffer from pain. I'm not going to go over that story. I do remember telling the story of this coming opioid crisis, this pill opioid crisis, back in 2012 at one of the sister organizations, I guess. And people looking at me and say, wait, what is this guy nuts? And I'm telling the story of the Sackler family and where it was back in 2010, 2011. Now you can read about that in any number of great books written about it. Dope Land, Dope Sick. John Quinones is a great writer. But that's how we got here, and the crisis only kept getting worse and worse. And I saw it coming the more I studied treatment courts. I found out there was a better way. There was another way of trying to do this. And I said, well, let me find out what this is. And at that stage, back in 2004, when I started this, there were about maybe 1,000. It's less than that, less than 1,000. And I traveled around the country to say, who are these judges talking to their participants differently? How is this making a difference? Why is it making a difference? What are these things called evidence-based practices? Judges are just supposed to, know the right thing to do, and they bring their own emotional baggage and many outdated, non-evidence-based practice ideas to sentencing. I said I was learning new things. So I said, I want to be a part of this. Not because I'm not a man of recovery. Everybody has family histories of it and that but it wasn't about that. And I didn't want to be preachy about it. I wanted to be practical about it and see if I could approach it in a way we could begin to change some outcomes here, because the outcomes clearly weren't changing. I was fortunate enough, once that I learned it, got it all packaged up. I mentioned that part where I was the county solicitor. Some of those that I worked with were still in county commission, and I simply went hat in hand with this idea, saying that I think we can really make a difference here. And clearly, it's something that if you're a stakeholder, if you're an office holder, somebody that is now beginning to see and be personally affected by substance use disorders in their family and in their community, might want to take a chance on. They forked over about $600,000, and off I went, setting up a treatment court. The treatment court is always based, everything it does is evidence-based. Everything it does is research-based. Every outcome has a connection back to what worked in a treatment court. And fortunately, I didn't have to invent this. They all operate by copy and steal everything. And you took every idea and I went to train. I had to learn to speak differently as a judge. Instead of telling people what to do, listening to them and figuring out what to do, being an agent of change, learning certain motivational interviewing techniques, and understanding, just training and training and training on what is this disease, and more importantly, what are the more successful types of recovery paradigms that you might want to try. So I launched it in April of 2006. We had one participant, and off we went. 18 years later, we've learned a great deal. We've just reached our 800th graduate. And if you understand when I explain the program how long it takes, you'll understand 800. It's a lot. We grew this program rather quick, and we were very successful. I think the most important thing I want to say at the outset is a lot of people can get on and talk about what they think works and what they believe works and what might be a promising, intervention in terms of those with substance use disorders. And what I feel comfortable with now, not only just with the national statistics, but we just did our own data outcome in terms of tracking the 800 so people that have completed our program. In terms of, we already knew the cost savings to the taxpayers. If you just simple formula that if a substance use individual spends a year in prison, which a lot of them end up doing, because about 75% of the people that are in the prisons have a clinically evaluated substance use disorder. We know that to start with, and we know that it costs about $22,000 per year to keep someone incarcerated, where we do not have therapeutic communities in our prison. Up until just a few years ago, we didn't even have medication-assisted treatment in our prisons, and we got ahead of that curve quick, knowing that that was the right thing to do. So there was just simply no recovery, and in fact, we knew they got worse. So we knew that as a backdrop, that we were already, could save taxpayer dollars. Jail days is the way in which we measure, what are the savings? What are we doing in terms of the community and keeping the community safer, and reducing, cost to the taxpayers. But the most significant data outcome that we were able to have is, we started with what we knew, is that anybody who comes in, and the substance use disordered person that comes into the justice system, and they will, and I used to say that they might back then, but now it's near certain, with the introduction of just powerfully lethal drugs, all synthetically derived at this stage, that the two most likely outcomes for an opioid, at least an opioid use disordered individual, is death, or beginning to introduce into the justice system and incarceration. So that's where we really had to look at what we were doing. So we knew that if they come in and they just come in the system, they get arrested, they go back out on probation. Probation, back at the time we started this court, really didn't have any resources and really didn't have any knowledge. Evidence-based practices in terms of substance use disorder supervision kind of didn't exist back in 2004. There were a couple of guys, one of my co-founders, a guy named Rick Wilson. He was just a guy that was stuck with a whole bunch of, mental health cases and substance use disorder cases. And, he kind of knew what to do, but once he found a court and a judge that actually cared about what we were doing with these outcomes, that's really where we got started. But looking back, we knew that if 70% of them are in the prison, and about of those ones that are in there, 70% of the time they will return to prison, to violations, or a new crime. We knew that. That's a fact that you can locate anywhere. What was important and what you have to show your stakeholders is what difference are you making. And with this last data outcome study, we are able to see that we reduced that 70% figure down to 34%. Nationally, it's probably about 38. So we are in court nationally. There is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a term that we in the justice system use. That's in the Constitution. That's in the law. You can't, somebody's got to, beyond a reasonable doubt, it is clear that a treatment court is, at least a drug treatment court, which is the most studied court in American jurisprudence, beyond a doubt, is the most successful intervention for the substance use disordered individual in the justice system. So I started, by saying, well, why? Why does that work? When I started the process, I know now, 18 years later, that it works, and it's gotten the attention of a lot of people. And that's why, if I come off a little passionate about it, I am. Why does it work? It's based of evidence-based components, but it's quite simply, you have a court-related system now that has changed how, in fact, it just approaches it all. It is a treatment-oriented system. For too long, we're sold either by the treatment community, but mostly by the pharmaceutical companies, that the drug treatment was some sort of this idea of a rehab. That's where it's got the name. I'll go to rehab. I'll go to a rehabilitation facility. And you're talking about, deadly diseases that have onsets over, through adolescence and up into, early adulthood, that take years and years for them to have their onsets. And we think that if we send you to, a rehab for 30 days, which is all insurance driven, maybe 60, maybe 90 if you're really lucky, and the wealthy can afford to the Karen foundations, that, but anything less than 90 days, the studies have completely showed, as I want to say, we might as well give you the money that you spent, send you to Disney World, yet at least have fun, and the outcome is exactly the same. So we knew what we were up against. You can't just have a system that says, inpatient treatment is like intensive care, detoxification, then the handoff into inpatient treatment, then into, if the, evaluation warrants, halfway houses, but then intensive outpatient. Treat it like a disease that it is. Stop treating it like, that it is a plague upon the community because of the outcomes of the crimes, but treat it like a disease. Treat it with the same compassion you would with other, relapsing diseases of the body. Again, I don't want to offend anybody, that is a survivor of cancer or heart disease or just any others, but nowhere do we find in this society that we wouldn't have the compassion and the caring for those types of relapsing diseases where we do have treatments that work, treatments that work that can hold dangerous cancers that were incurable almost, now in remission. Heart disease, we've made dramatic inroads with it, both medication assisted, but changing habits. That's what treatment courts are about. Changing habits, changing things, changing thinking patterns. So we would never deny any other medically. Why would we deny a substance use disordered person this kind of care? So within a treatment court, within a justice system, the judge has got a lot of power. And I felt that maybe, hearing that power actually reaching a hand out to the participant and starting it with pure empathy, just understanding and empathy and saying, hey, we are in positions of power and we hear you and we hear this disease loud and clear and we care. That's the start. The rest is all structure. You build a structure of the program that's based on the evidence-based practices of treatment. Treatment long-term will work for anyone. That we know. Treatment short-term won't work. It's just start. It's a great idea. Inpatient treatment is a wonderful start. And then long-term, outpatient treatment is the key to it. Our program lasts 18 months. With 18 months, you are going to get a changed individual. They will change. And the thing about a structured treatment court is we make them go to treatment. They have to go to treatment. It is a collaborative, interagency-based program where the probation department, now we've even changed their name. We took them completely out of probation and we made them all about treatment. Megan is the deputy director of treatment courts and treatment services in this county, which is a position that no one could have imagined 10 years ago, just not imagined. Probation was a very punishment or at least a supervision oriented without real knowledge about treating the underlying. And I look back at it and I said, it's pretty amazing. Megan used to be our coordinator. She came from Chester County. And again, we couldn't do it without people like Megan. But when you start thinking that way, that we can maybe begin to offer these treatment services. So that's the core of any treatment court. We measure them in units of treatment. We're talking about hundreds of units of treatment. Those are the hour-long treatment sessions that someone has to complete this program. You are going to change without going in or stepping onto anybody else's shoes as to what, how this disease takes its foothold. I think we know it by now. We know the adverse childhood event studies. We know now without a doubt that trauma is the major driver of most substance use disorder. But trauma comes in many forms. It's not how we used to think of it. And unless we start to treat trauma, we're not going to make a difference with this. So having all the treatment modalities available to us from the cross spectrum of everything possible that you can bring to bear with a substance use disorder, a treatment competent court will do that. And again, that includes medication assisted treatment, which has made huge changes for us and the ability to keep people in treatment from this disease. And when I speak of that, I speak of the MATs like Suboxone, most of you know, methadone, Vivitrol, all the different types that we employ, which are evidence-based practices. And if you don't use them, you're not a treatment court. So the next major, evidence-based practice is what we call accountability. That's where you actually have the treatment officers now are treatment officers in terms of both understanding of the dynamics of a substance use disorder. What is a substance? How does it work? What does it look like? What are the drugs of abuse? How do they form out? Together with understanding recovery and understanding the principles of recovery and the combinations. They actually become support agents. They actually become support people in the lives of the recovering man or woman in the treatment court. It's magical to watch, and that's not what what the substance use disorder person on probation used to do, is avoid a probation officer at all costs. Why? Because when you're always has a substance in you and you meet your probation officer, you went to jail. So it actually worked the opposite way. And we've changed that dynamic throughout all of probation now in terms of being substance use disorder and recovery competent. But that's a major part. Accountability, honesty, beginning to trust those that are there and they know and they understand that are there to help them. Our major thing is the testing. We test them every day. And testing's not to play a game of gotcha or catch you and then punish. That's not how it works. But you do not have recovery. You are not in recovery if you don't have some sort of testing system related. As much as we'd love to believe our loved ones, but they have, their disease have turned them into cognitive acrobats where their very survival and be able to keep using makes them put a different version of themselves out to whoever they're trying to get one removed from so they can keep using their drugs. So accountability is important. The third part is then peer support, changing the faces of the people that they are now with as opposed to the faces when they're active in their addictions or use disorders. And again, we speak of the traditional ones like AA, NA, still the best peer supported individual interventions known out there. And they've been around for 85 years and they work. And those that follow them, they have much better outcomes. We've got certain, sometimes more anecdotal evidence, but those who stay in, a traditional peer-supported AA or NA for over 5 years, then their outcomes, towards 10 years, 15 years are pretty amazing when they also came in with recovery-based services. We also have to use, certain non-spiritual related, and we have, a very strong partnership with PROACT. They're from the Council of Southeastern Pennsylvania. They've become a partnership, a peer partnership with our program. And I forgot to mention that we have our own treatment providers, 3 treatment providers that work in different areas of the county. There's actually about 7 or 8, but 3 core ones that we work with that we use, that they are part of the collaborative team. We do emphasize work, but work not until they have at least begun to get out of the critical stage of their recovery. So work is not a priority, but then work does become a major part of their recovery after a certain phase. So the last part is, what's drug court? What's it look like? How does it act? It is actually a collaborative partnership of the treatment providers, of the treatment officers, of the district attorney's office, of the public defender's office, and the defense attorneys in the community. We also have our peer partnership with PROACT and many other justice-related services partnerships that are all collaborative partners. It works where we meet once a week, what we call a staffing, and we talk about each participant. We're going over exactly what their week is. Then based upon where they are in the phase structure of the program, on Tuesday nights, we operate from about 4:30 to whenever, and I see the participants. We are what is known as, now a treatment court competent, meaning, and a trauma competent courtroom, meaning I no longer use a robe. I no longer sit up on a bench. I bring down to a table where it's just me and the participant and the treatment officer. And it's all about motivational interviewing at that time. It's not about telling anybody or judging anybody about what they're doing, but using, evidence-based practice, motivational interviewing techniques that makes it work, that begins I become, an agent of change along with them, begin to understand their disease and know that's what I'm talking to as opposed to the individual. And then, using certain types of concepts. We review them, they're constantly being reviewed and assessed. What's their appropriate level of care? We work with assessors constantly, just like you would if you were treating for a physical disease, a relapsing physical disease. Where do we stand? How's our treatment working? Is it working? If the assessment's not working, it's being evidenced by the symptomatic use of drugs, or they're starting to withdraw and pull out, maybe abscond, then we get them back. We have a partnership with the law enforcement and the sheriff's office. They sit at the table with us. We don't lose. Just before I came on, I watch it every once in a while. Those of you who are family members of substance use disorder individuals, I don't recommend watching, but that's Kensington Live. If you want to see what the other side looks at, those of you who aren't, that are just interested in this topic, that's ground zero. That's the new bottom. When they talk about hitting bottom, you start there and you keep digging. But whatever, we can go down and we can get out and get these individuals back into treatment within a matter of hours sometimes when they take off. That's how connected we are. So, I'm for sure I've already taken up too much time and I'm overgoing. That's how we work. It's given me a great deal of knowledge over 18 years of how this disease works. I know these are, again, parents, loved ones, could be of a child who is growing up and is getting proactive in terms of saying, are there preventative measures? There are. I can talk about it. I won't right now until some people with more expertise, but 18 years at this business, 18 years of passion around the recovery. I call men and women who are in recovery heroic. I changed the whole, people talk about, going into, we have hero worship in this country about, those that go in and, are selfless to save others' lives in a burning building, but men and women who really undertake recovery, and those of us that support it. Don't try to change it, don't judge it, just support it. That's where you're going to get the outcome. So I've worked with parents for all 18 years. It's difficult. So there may be questions that come up just from my experience and also understanding evidence-based practices. What do work? What are some of the more, different treatments that I see in 10 years that might be working? So with that, I didn't keep my time, but like any time, if you hear passion in my voice, that's because there is passion. If there were more judges like me that spoke this language and spoke with this passion, that cared, then we truly have a justice system for the people. Because, and the sad part of it, there isn't. I have a couple of colleagues that work with me here. Judge Wall runs our targeted opioid phase program, which is, it's a precursor to treatment court, but it attacks it right from the source. And we started that when the overdose crisis started. Then we have our behavioral health court run by Judge Hillis, and that is people who have mental health, behavioral health issues. And then finally, our veterans treatment court with Judge Eisenberg. So we are a completely involved county. Those of you who are tax-paying citizens in Montgomery County, it's a good start. Am I kidding myself to believe if every judge ran a treatment court docket, we'd be well on our way to really telling the community that the way in which to change the safety of the community and which is supposedly the goal of punishment and incarceration, that truly they can look at these treatment courts as the ways that really are the future. It's not there yet. People just have not changed enough. So with that said, Megan, I don't know whether you have anything to, she's more about how we reach out into the community in terms of community resources for those that we have in our program. So,
Your Honor, I would like to also just talk maybe a little bit, just kind of expanding on, especially for some of the parents that may not be familiar with what treatment courts are and how it relates to their child. And if their child were to find themselves, it's never ideal, especially if your child is suffering with substance use disorder or mental health disorders to find your child now involved in the criminal justice system here in Montgomery County or any county. And one of the things that I've read through some of the questions that were asked is trying to engage your child or your loved one in these types of services without them going to prison or without them going to jail, or trying to intervene at an earlier stage. And one of the things about treatment courts is that there are numerous different ways that individuals can come into our treatment court. We have some individuals who might have through their substance use or mental health have occurred new charges here in the county, and they might be eligible to have, by participating in the treatment court, if they're eligible, the opportunity for diversion. So it might give them the chance to go through our program, have access to services, and our goal is to help them alleviate barriers that are keeping them to have access to services, access to treatment, assisting with the daily needs that they may have, giving them that accountability, giving them that structure, giving them the support that they need to build a recovery for themselves. And if they are successful, they actually have the opportunity of having those charges dismissed and their record expunged. So there is one diversionary way, for individuals. Our district attorney's office, as part of our team, they do review cases that come through, applicants that come through, and they do work with us to try to see if different applicants would be eligible for the diversionary track. If you have a loved one who is on supervision with Montgomery County Adult Probation and Parole and they find themselves in violation, we are another avenue that individual can take. And our goal is to hopefully get them out of incarceration and get them into our court to assist them with the services that we put in place. And I'll talk a little bit about like the daily, what that looks like for somebody in our court. So somebody could be very new into the system and, trying to get that diversion aspect, and somebody could have general supervision and beyond, and unfortunately not be doing well in that circumstance. We do go out into the prison. We do actually do orientations where our coordinators go out and try to have advocacy for our program, so individuals are aware, coming to events like this and getting out into the community to educate individuals on what it is that we are and what we can offer is important. And then as a team, we end up becoming referral sources for the courts just by knowing different individuals that somehow end up involved in the criminal justice system. Our district attorney may make a referral. Our sheriff's department has made many referrals when they're out serving a warrant and they meet an individual who's struggling with substance use. The next thing they're doing is emailing myself and our coordinators and say, hey, how do we get this person into treatment court? So just by being able to just educate enough and get enough education out about our treatment courts, I've had, I've contacted Kim plenty of times where I've had parents who have been struggling. I've had to have sad conversations with them about what's happening with their child, and trying to have encourage them to reach out to the parent support group, and then vice versa. We've had some people reach out to us through the parent support group who have said, my child has now ended up in the criminal justice system. I'm not sure what to do. We try to give them the information that can help them and see if this is an avenue that they may be able to go. As Judge mentioned, we are a multidisciplinary team, and we do tend, our goal is to always follow best practices. Some of the things that we have put in place that help us stay within those best practices is we use validated risk tools. So our goal is to always assess the individual. We don't want to just judge someone based on what might have occurred leading them into the criminal justice system. We have to take a look at a whole. And the one way that we do that is by doing a comprehensive clinical assessment. These assessments really take a look at the individual and help us build a treatment plan for that person, whether it's substance related, mental health related, co-occurring, or what might be going on. If we don't take the time to understand the individual and what they're experiencing and what are their barriers and what's over, bringing them to us, then we aren't able to really get them connected to the right resources and treatment services. And then we'll just kind of keep seeing that revolving door and that same thing happening over and over again for them. One of the other things that we do in the court that's very important, in addition to accountability and structure, is we really want to focus on more proximal and distal goals for the individual. The judge mentioned, eventually maybe getting a job. Like for them, they might think a job right now is really what I need. but maybe that's somewhere in the future for themselves. So our treatment partners, our recovery specialists, our officers, the judge, everyone will work with that individual to encourage them to focus more on the things that are in front of them that we can help them. What are the things that are going to help them get to the next step, and then to the next step, and then to the next step? So we tried to piece it for them to make it more manageable, because it is very overwhelming. And one of the things we've always noticed too was that it becomes very overwhelming for the family. When you have a loved one who's struggling and in crisis, you just want help. And it can be very overwhelming of understanding what services are in our county. Who do I call? Who can I reach out to? Who can help me? I need help right this moment. And not even necessarily always feeling like you're very aware of what is out there in terms of resources. And for us, what's always been helpful, and that's what we've always really worked here and hard within our treatment courts, is to kind of build up our resource guide. So we kind of know, hey, this person's currently struggling with this, that's going to cause them have this outcome. Who can we reach out to? Oh, this is our person and our contact at that resource. We reach out to them, get them connected, and hopefully we're able to have a better outcome for them in what they're experiencing. Some of the partners that come to play that we didn't mention earlier is our justice related services, access services. They work with any of our individuals here in Montgomery County who are struggling with serious mental illness. We also work, as Judge mentioned, with PROACT and the Montgomery County Recovery Community Center. They work with individuals primarily who are struggling with substance use. Some of these are peer-led. Some of these are just walk-ins where we can walk down to the center with the person and engage them with somebody who's able to connect them to either smart recovery or a job placement. Could be a housing issue, could be it could even just be something in needing, like they have no food, or they need something, they have nowhere to live, and we're helping getting them connected that way. Some of the other things that come into play where we try to be partners with, which only reinforce the resources that we have access to, and some of you may not even know our resources that are out there, is the Montgomery County Recovery Initiative. There is a website, and I'm going to give Kim some of these resources just so you have a way that you can go and kind of check out some of the websites that are available and some of the resources that are out there. They actually have a 61-page resource guide for here in Montgomery County. That is 61 pages of various different resources that are attainable and accessible for your loved ones. And it has descriptions about what different resources, whether you're looking for adolescents or you're looking for adults, housing, food, education, mental health, drug and alcohol, family support. It's 61 pages. They do a really great job of trying to keep it updated. Montgomery County Office of Mental Health actually has a whole resource guide for families and adolescents. They have, that's a great resource. They have a roadmap to recovery, which gives you a whole view of all the different things that are attainable and resources. One of the things I think for us that does work, if you do find your loved one involved in the criminal justice system, and to think about maybe treatment court being the avenue for them. The judge mentioned earlier about like alleviating boundaries and barriers for the individuals. We are very lucky that we do have, because we are a multidisciplinary team, Magellan is actually part of our team. They come to our team meetings. In addition, we are very lucky that we also have various funding resources available. So if insurance, let's say, doesn't cover, insurance lapse, someone's inpatient and they need to stay longer, we actually have resources available to assist them to be able. We do not want them to have barriers to reach the resources. We don't want to see someone not be able to stay in treatment longer if it's needed because of an insurance issue. So when they are involved within our treatment courts, you can find that they will not be shortened with their time in treatment. We also try to ensure that they have supports in the community and that there's a game plan in place. Judge mentioned this earlier where he talked about the individual who might go inpatient for 30 days and then they're right back in the same environment. We really piecemeal it for the person and try to take it step by step. And if there's a barrier presented, you have a team of people wrapped around you trying to help overcome that barrier. And more often than not, we do want to include family in that process. We want to hear from you. We want to see what your thoughts are. You are in the home with them, and sometimes coming home as challenging as that is, isn't always the best for you or for them. We want to know that information because we'd rather give them the opportunity and you the opportunity to have a better outcome for your loved one. And you may not even realize the resources that we have available to assist them. You know, sometimes people might think they have to come home, but there's many great recovery houses that we have a great relationship with in Montgomery County that we would be able to get them connected to. And there are other housing opportunities out there that we'd be able to assist them with as well. So I know it's never ideal to think that, you know, you'd have to look to the criminal justice system as a way to have access to different services for your loved one. But if you do find yourself in that, I'm hoping by what judges expressed and what I've explained, that our goal is always trying to divert from incarceration, to give them the opportunity to really try to put them in the best place that they can, to want to have more for themselves, to have the opportunity to address things that are going on that are causing them to stay in this repeated cycle of what's happening with their substance use or their mental health. And more often than not, when they're given that opportunity, they tend to do very well and they succeed. And it's not just going to be the moment that they're with us. We try to build them up while they're with us so that they're able to carry that on once they're no longer with us in our court. So we do have graduation coming up. May is treatment court month, so I did want to invite anybody on this call to come and watch one of our drug treatment court graduations. Our next one is actually on Tuesday, May 14th at the Montgomery County Courthouse at 4:15 in courtroom A. And I can get that information to Kim as well. For any loved ones or family members that are on here, if you may not be aware of it, but there's also a second chance resource fair that's going to be happening on Tuesday, April 30th at the George Washington Carver Community Fair Center. It's from 10 to 12, and this is actually run through our clerk of courts here in Montgomery County, and treatment courts. I myself will be there. You know, just there to talk to anybody in our community who wants to learn about treatment courts. And I believe there's a lot of other agencies, a lot of other resources, community agent organizations, nonprofit organizations, treatment agencies, and other county agencies that will be there as well. So I will get the flyer to Kim for that. And I would highly encourage anyone, I know it's difficult sometimes during the day, but if you're able to make it, hopefully you'd be able to get connected if there's a certain resource you might be looking for your loved one. Thank you.
Wow. Both of you, I can't even tell you how appreciative I am. And by the way, I've had the pleasure of attending a graduation session. That is amazing. It's such a positive experience. It's so affirming. It gives us all a lot of hope. And so I appreciate you extending the invitation to people who are joining us. So yes, all of the details of what you just explained would be great for us to include on that follow-up page. I love that you're using motivational interviewing. We use this quite a lot when we're working with families in crisis as well. And it's so, it's just the outcomes are amazing. And I love that. And wow, the robe is gone. I can't imagine. It's a great thing. Good for you. So progressive. I love it. Thank you both so much. And I'm sure we'll have some questions for you, but I want to turn it over to Samantha now.
Judge almost had me crying.
Like come to a graduation.
Thank God someone's
it's our
going
100.
So I can
it's our 175th graduation, and I'm proud to. I think we're up in that number. It's just and I cry every time too, so don't worry about it.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So one of the things I did while you guys were talking is to show how much I love those within the criminal justice system. This is just a framed picture of me and my attorney. That's in my office. And he was a huge advocate for me in terms of when I entered recovery, getting custody of my daughter back. So we love the criminal justice system. And when you said agent of change, I was like, I can't wait to go next. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. But my name is Samantha, and I'm a person that's in long-term recovery. I'm also a person that unfortunately, but fortunately had quite a few consequences that were long lasting, both legal and medical. The medical ones would come first and the legal ones would come after. And so I just kind of, I'm here really to share a little bit about my story, looking at the viewpoint from someone who's gone through it. And really what I want to do is give parents, family members some type of hope that regardless of the way somebody accesses care, the way they get into treatment, the way they get the mustard seed that then becomes something much larger and life-changing, that sometimes happens through the criminal justice portion or through a medical issue, and typically happens because of a crisis situation. And so, although, again, I said the unfortunate but fortunate circumstances for me is that I grew up in a very typical two-parent suburban household. When you said the Sackler family, I also was like, oh, and then I was like, how can I make that positive too? Because I'm a byproduct, and again, unfortunate or fortunate of the Sackler family. So being someone who I grew up in a house, two-parent income, two-parent household, the youngest of three. I was a varsity cheerleader. I was on the school newspaper. I was on the yearbook. I played the piano. I played the clarinet, played the violin. And I cheered varsity, and everything on the outside looked as though this is what you want your kid to be, right? I mean, I have a 12-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a surprise gift, a 7-month-old. And so when I think of my children and I think of all those things I just mentioned, I'm like, yeah, that's what I would want for my kid. And that's what, my parents did for me. They did the best they could with what they had and the knowledge they had at the time. And I would end up, experimenting and then become, a college student. And then, my addiction progressed in a way that it was harder and harder and harder to keep that facade on the outside up and running and okay, because as long as I could, be away at school, still get good grades, make everything look okay, have friends that appeared to be also thriving in life, that then I could continue to scoot by, right? Unaware, no one, really had much of a thought or an idea. It wasn't this whole thing that was out in the front of the world. This is pre-opiate epidemic too. So I think it's important to look at, for me now, I look back at the time frame and I'm like, wow, we weren't there yet. Things were starting to boil up, but the medical part, the legal part, the things we weren't there yet to kind of provide that prevention in the way that we are now. But, I'd end up using Oxycontin, and then, the progression to the use of heroin. And, a lot of times it's also scary to say, or scary for a parent to hear that if the love of a child, right, a love of a parent, a great family, all these things could somehow make you completely protected from substance use disorder, then none of us would be on the call, right? Because I know that I came from a family that loved me, and I know I came from a family that if love could have cured my addiction or saved me, it certainly would have. And that's a scary thing to say, because it wasn't the fear, initially it wasn't the fear of death that pushed me into a situation to get better, right? So the progression happened for me, and I ended up becoming an IV drug user, and I got really, really sick, and I couldn't figure out why. And I ended up having what's known as endocarditis. I had right side heart failure. So my tricuspid valves were blown from an infection that I got from the continued use of a needle. The infection went into my bloodstream, and then to my heart, onto my valves, which grew an infection, causing the tricuspid valves to be strained and kind of break away. So I'm 22 years old. I'm a college student, and I'm on life support. And, my parents are called into a room and they're told, hey, your daughter has a 10% chance to live. And, hey, guess what? This only happens really to people who either have a dental procedure with dirty tools, or if they are an IV drug user. And my mother, honestly, said, not my daughter, right? She doesn't even like to get a flu shot, which that was true up until, my disease progressed far enough that I saw that the effect that people were getting with the needle. And then all of a sudden, someone who didn't want to get the flu shots putting needles in their arm. And my parents at the time were completely flabbergasted and shocked as to what they were being told, because for them, again, everything on the outside looks okay. I'm like 60 college credits in. Things look okay again on the outside. But here I am now, and I'm really, really, really sick. And I have a 10% chance to live. And I had a blood clot in my lung, and I had pneumonia, and I was septic, and I was intubated, and I was on the ventilators for almost a week. And during that time, I mean, the nurses and the doctors, and again, I would eventually, a couple years ago, actually, I requested all of my med records. And what I wanted to look for was any instance where did someone come and talk to me or my parents and say, hey, I'm a social worker. Hey, this is an issue. Like your daughter has a severe, not pretty significant, she has a severe addiction to opiates, and she puts them in a needle and she puts them in her arm. And there wasn't any mention of that. Because again, we're talking about 2010, where it kind of, things were starting to get there, but it was nothing like it is today. And so, my parents kind of had to come to terms pretty quick with the fact that I had a problem. And my parents at the time thought that because I almost died, right? So after 7 days, they took me off the ventilator, and by the grace of God and unmerited gift, my organs, I started to work again, and I started to kind of come back, to life. And they were able to diagnose what was wrong. They were able to start giving me IV antibiotics, and I would spend the next almost 3 months in that hospital. And then after, because these consequences, our bodies can rejuvenate and heal really, really quickly, right? But sometimes there's long-lasting issues. So, as a result, the infection hit my bones and my muscles, and I had been bedridden for almost 3 months. So I had to learn how to walk again. I had to build up my strength in my hands. I could barely peel an orange. And this whole time I'm being hospitalized, and at no point did I think this is a serious situation, right? Because that's how delusional I was. And even though I wasn't putting a needle in my arm every day, I wasn't getting better in my mind. I was still highly delusional. And to be honest, couldn't wait till I got out so I could use again. And I got out of the hospital. And the second I got home, I started using again. And I used, and then I actually had open heart surgery at the age of 22. And so there I am in cardiac rehab with my pink little iPod, and everybody who's in their 70s and 80s who were supposed to have open heart surgery, right? And again, I still saw nothing wrong with it. And my parents thought that because I was scared to die, that I'd get better. And that's not the case. And I had open heart surgery. They did the repair, all of that. And again, I just couldn't wait to get out of the hospital to use again. And I took every opportunity I could to push and justify to my parents that, no, I'm doing fine. I ended up having the doctors prescribe me to Oxycontin. And, a long story short is I would continue to use after having open heart surgery for another 2 years. I went to my first treatment and again, got out, couldn't wait to use. And then I ended up going back to school because I thought that was going to cure me. And I was going to go finish my senior year of college, and this was going to be a phase of my life, and everything was going to be all right. And again, I go back to school, and I'm an intern out of jail. Sorry, Your Honor. I'm an intern out of jail, and I'm using. And I'm just trying to get through every day, one day at a time, to get the next one. And again, a very drawn out, sad story short is that I found myself living in Shippensburg, which is where I went to school, stealing sandwiches from the Rudders because I wasn't brave enough to take them out of the Rudders, so I'd eat them in the bathroom, but I had no money to buy food. And any little bit of money I had went to using. I was in an apartment that I had at the end had no electric, no food, nothing. I'm living like an animal. I'm pregnant, and my parents, at that time said, "Come home." And I go through my pregnancy, and I'm putting myself in a situation that's unsafe. I'm putting my daughter in situations that's unsafe. Again, I will say it out loud because it's scary, but I do want to break the stigma of it. I used while pregnant. I had my daughter, and again, another unmerited gift is she was born in September of 2011 with no complications from my use whatsoever. And even after having her, I think there was a small piece of me that thought, this is going to cure me, right? Because I am a mom now. I can't be using drugs. And I think that there was a piece of my parents too that wanted to believe that that was going to cure it too. And again, what comes to where the meshing of the medical and all of that stuff come together with legal is because on December 21st of 2011, with my 3-month-old daughter in a little seat, I overdosed on my parents' couch, and I woke up to a police officer about to Narcan me and my mom. And the police officer said, there was also a police officer there, and he said, "Merry Christmas. You can go to treatment and not jail tonight." And I'll always keep my police report because it reminds me of how delusional I was, because I told him I was just sleeping. I was very tired. I wasn't very tired, and I obviously wasn't just sleeping. And that night, my parents, I didn't know, had went and gotten, this is where I call it the trifecta of the perfect storm. For me, is that, which also is perfect for this avenue and this topic, is that I didn't know that when I came home from the hospital, my mom had caught me using, and I told her I was just doing it on the weekends. Everything was fine. And I really thought she believed me, and I begged her not to tell my dad. And so she promised she wouldn't. And I didn't know that she indeed did tell my dad. And they started going to a therapist together. And for those 3 months, that therapist kept telling them, something's going to happen. And it's going to push you to a point, and your pain's going to get great enough. And you're going to make a decision that's going to protect you as the family and this innocent child. And she's going to have to, make a tough choice whether she wants to get better or not. And that is kind of what happened on that night too. And I looked at my mom and dad, and I really thought, I said, "I'm just going to do outpatient." And my mom said, "No, you're not." And she said, "You're either going to go to treatment tonight, or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to live on the street, but you're not going to do it here. You're not going to continue to be a tornado, and you're not going to just run havoc on this baby's life, because it's not fair, because the baby doesn't have a choice." Now, again, of course, I didn't have the power of choice either, but you guys know what I mean. And so I went to treatment that night, and it started this ripple effect of change that kind of happened in my life, because the fear of death wasn't enough, because the love of the family wasn't enough, and because that police officer that night, police officers, if you don't know, are able to show a level of discretion, right? And that night, that police officer showed me not just discretion, but he showed me grace and love, because he did not have to say, "You can go to treatment and not jail." And so that night I went to treatment and not jail. And I got to kind of, show up, and the probation office at that time, I I ended up going to court. I had to do 3 months of probation, and I was like the happiest person ever to give my urine. And they were like, "Why are you so happy to pee?" They thought it was a little shady at first. I was like, "No, I'm just really excited to not give you a dirty urine." And they kind of followed me through, and it was like this chance for me to, show up and show that just because I got in trouble, just because I'm on probation, doesn't make me a bad person. And so what I started to do and what I started to be able to see because of these people that were placed in my life that provided me these opportunities, these moments of grace and these moments of really being a change agent, right? So that officer, I very much know that nothing happens by mistake. And so if that officer that night would have had me go to booking and had me go to our local jail, and maybe I would have been there for 24 hours, I don't know. But I would have been 24 hours away from what happened with that decision, 24 hours away from each person I met in treatment, right? 24 hours away from each person that over the last almost, God willing, 13 years has been placed in my life or taken out of my life to kind of show that everything has happened for a reason. And again, I can tie all that back to those ripple effects. And those things that took place that were very much within the medical realm of things, which very much were in the criminal justice realm of things, and kind of take the consequences. And when I said at the beginning, fortunate or unfortunate, right? Some people would look at those circumstances and say, that's really unfortunate. And I look at the circumstances now and I think, wow, I'm really fortunate that happened to me, because everything I have in my life today is a result of those things that started to take place that wouldn't have been there again if that one person wouldn't have provided me that opportunity. And because that happened, and all these years later, my mission in life every day is to really try to be a small change agent in someone else's life, because it doesn't have to be something huge like someone let me go to treatment, not jail, right? It can be something as small as somebody thinks that a judge is a bad person, right? And they meet you, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, there's no robe, there's no all these things I thought a judge are or is or can be, are all just preconceived ideas in my mind that aren't real. And so just seeing somebody I think of it as small as when I go to the gas station, I also want to be a representation of someone that's in recovery, right? Someone that, walked through the storm, and someone that I'm one of those odd people who runs to the fire to pull everybody out because there were people there pulling me out, right? And so I say all that to say that, again, when we look at these situations, and I look at being on probation, I had actually, it's ironic because I had 3 more days left of ARD before I overdosed and got another charge. So, I kind of, again, looked at it initially as unfortunate. And now I'm like, this is fortunate, because again, every person I talk to, every time I can get on something like this and say, hey, this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to my family. And, to give you an idea of what, things are like today as a result of all those things working together is that, I'm married, that daughter I had, I worked my way and I got full custody, and my attorney was with me all the way until my husband adopted her. He actually just became a judge too. So shout out to him. And I know that he's going to be awesome too. Because again, for me and with him, he was like, when I got into family, initially was in family law. And he's like, it's been really sad over the years. I've had to be a part of a lot of sad stuff, but he says that being able to be with me through that journey, he knows why God made him an attorney, and he knows why he went into that part of law, because of watching my situation happen. And that's where we really see the change too, because now I let him see the change and he saw the change. And now he makes different decisions because of the change he saw. And so that's really what, all I can do to give back. And, I have 3 kids. I said 12, 7, and then our surprise miracle baby who's 7 months old. And, I get to do stuff like this, which I love. I get to do, I do a lot of trainings with the Pennsylvania State Police, with the Pennsylvania Sheriff's Association, a ton of stuff with the Attorney General's office, just providing trainings and being able to, speak and give back, and doing trainings for probation and parole, and talking about stigma, and sometimes it's not always going and doing a training with a group that, like, it's not always going with the state police and doing a training. It's going and sharing my story and saying, hey, listen, look at it from this way. And this is what an officer did to me. And then to end on it, I went and I wrote a letter and left it with the arresting officer. I think I was about 2 years into recovery, and I told him, what I think he did for me and what that night has done. And, I laid it out real simple for him. And as I lay out right now, that I get to be a mom, and I get to be an aunt, and I get to be, I get to be employed, and I get to give back, and I get to be,
I think Willistown is having a chemical pickup.
Folks, please mute yourself if you're not.
Oh, I was worried. I thought we were in an emergency situation.
I don't think so.
But for me, it's all these little things that come, like, it's being able to go back to school. It's, being able to, again, just be that person that can maybe change that one person's mind that might have a negative viewpoint, and to show them how to take unfortunate and make that be fortunate, right? Especially when we're talking about motivational interviewing. So I love that too. But I just want to thank you, Kim, for having me on, and for everyone that talked before, because I do truly believe that there are these access points to those mustard seeds that then all get put together and then become someone really being able to change their life. And so I'm grateful that I get to be a change agent, and I get to be part of the solution and not so much part of the problem today. So thanks for letting me share. And thanks for having me.
Samantha, holy cow. I mean, you're one of my favorite people anyway. And this was just, I mean, my God, I always say that, we have some like really highly esteemed civil servants here tonight with us who we really appreciate and respect. It is the person in recovery who, forgive me folks, but they are the most important person in the room. And your story is so powerful and so motivating, and I hope give people a lot of hope. And my gosh, talk about consequences. And I really appreciated the fact that you talked about, you kind of, several of you touched on the family members, because my son didn't have huge consequences. He had a lot of little consequences that I was trying to make go away, which was not helpful. And it was when I hit bottom, when I was tired of fearing that he was not going to live another day, that I couldn't go another day longer with that. So the consequences might be very challenging for us before they even hit our child. And that speaks to this question that was just put in the chat, which is a great question. It's very challenging. What if a person with substance use disorder has not broken any laws? They say the worst thing that can happen to an alcoholic is nothing, right? So what leverage can family members have, especially when younger children are involved, where there may be concerns about driving under the influence with the kids in the car, but no definite proof? I mean, we hear this so often in our parent partnership meetings, because we have grandparents with grown children who are parents themselves with a substance use disorder, and they're trying to hold a boundary, but they're worried about the grandchild. So this is such a challenge.
It's such a great question, though, because if I'd asked my parents now, we have very open and honest discussions, and now we can look back and I'll be like, Dad, remember that time? And we can kind of like chuckle about it now, because now it's 12 years ago, right? But I can share from experience that night, when my parents came and found me on the couch, my mother could have very easily taken my purse and all the things in it and not done anything with that. And that night she gave it to the police officer. And so essentially, my mom, even knowing I had 3 more days of ARD, even knowing the money she had to put in because of ARD, she told the police officer the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And then I got another charge. But it was enough to kind of put in a situation where my mom and dad had to put that baby first because I wasn't able to make the decision. That part of my brain that told me that what I should do and how to be a good mom didn't work. It's literally offline. And so again, like when I talk to my parents and I say, how did the pain get great enough? And they were like, that night is when the real idea of the consequences that could have been much worse really came to light for us and became a reality. Because again, what if I would have been in the car, which I had been many times before, right? So I never say, hey, call the cops on your kid. I can never say, hey, kick your kid out, because even my 8-year-old, when my 7-year-old gets in trouble, I'm like, not my kid. So we can't tell anyone that's what you have to do. But what I'll say is, again, is when the pain gets great enough for the person that's putting the substance in their body, the pain gets great enough for the family member. And the pain has to get great enough for you to maybe, my mom said that there were many nights that she cried when I was in treatment because she felt like if she wouldn't have told the police the truth, then my charges would have been off my record. Because at the time, ironically, I wanted to be a probation officer. And she cried at night when I was in treatment because she said that my degree wouldn't matter anymore in criminal justice. And I would never get to be a probation officer because I would never have a clean record now because I messed up ARD. And she carried that for a long time until she was able to get to a place to put it down, to say, I either feel bad that like you can't be a PO, or I could be crying at your grave. And that's where it got for them, is that they had to make that choice.
Sadly, to the end, try to give a judicial perspective of that answer and working. It's hard because the nature of the disorder. They allow parents, obviously, who are suffering at the behavior. They kind of force the parent to kind of take on the role of being the guardian of their behavior, as if the parent. And I think any parent, anyone loved one with someone that clearly has a substance use disorder, the way I see it is there will always be opportunities for intervention. Taking on, the nature of the substance use disorder personally, as a parent, and just being so frustrated. I mean, that we know has no effect at all. I mean, what happens is you get resentful because they're not taking your advice. There's no real way to get them to begin to look at it, and resentment really begins to corrode you. And the disease is just a disease. It will still be the face of the disease. So, I mean, I've told parents, and one of the stories that I tell at all the graduations is opportunity. What is the opportunity for an intervention? And by that, I don't mean the kind you watch on television shows, where families come in and confront. You can try it. That generally has been proven not to work. It only begins to, it furthers the cycle of shame and stress, which is part of the use dynamic. So, I mean, it's difficult when she gave that example of turning, we've had many that it does come from the family. But if it's with a mindset that, and what we've learned now is some of the best outcomes, some of the best treatment, some of, the most coordinated long-term recovery, which is what this disorder requires, is now being found in the justice system. That is a bad comment on our society. It's terrible. So, yeah, opportunities are tough, but you have to find them, and there are plenty of things that you can find with your child. But if you're hearing a judge say turning them in with a purpose, maybe that would work. Still, they are individuals that will make their own decision, and they are not rational thinking individuals. Their disease is talking, and they will attempt to resist at all costs until they're ready. So that may not be what you want to hear.
And the only thing I would really like to just add to that as well is just making sure you're having the supports in place for yourself as you're trying to navigate this, because there are times where you would think it would be a simple answer and it's just not. And there could reach a point where you do have proof and you're going to need support for yourself to be able to maybe take some of those harder steps to set those boundaries, or have to reach out to law enforcement or any other services that could be in place to ensure, the safety for the kids. And it's important that you do have support in place for you, because that's going to be a very trying moment. So hopefully, staying connected to meetings like this and coming to events and having some other individuals who might have had some prior similar experiences who can be there to be support for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, you ultimately find out if the behaviors that we know that you will see pretty much universally in any substance use disordered individual becomes the real central detriment to the parent's emotional condition, then you're kind of losing connection with the truth of the whole matter. You can feel pain and you can make a decision whether to be in the relationship with that, but the idea, the concept that you can save, we have learned just through so much that it can't happen. No one can. That's why I think, when they get in, you just can't save the child yourself. We're talking about adult children that are sadly between the ages of 18 and 25, when still the forebrain isn't working properly, and they're just not going to hear your messages. They have too much further to go in their loss. That's the problem, until they hit their bottom, and bottom has been constantly redefined. So I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. And definitely support group meetings. We have exactly that scenario reflected frequently in our parent partnership meetings. So please always encourage family members to attend those, because we may not have all the answers and solutions for everything, but at least you'll feel supported and understood and heard and not judged. This is an absolutely judgment-free zone. So yes, absolutely. We are really at the end of our time, but we have two questions, and I wanted to see if we could at least try to address at least this one. What can we do to help more counties embrace the idea of drug treatment court and offering what Montgomery County has created?
Yeah, look, this is just, getting people to understand and getting the words out. It is changing, but you're only as good as the judges that want to undertake it within a certain county. We are nowhere near where we need to be as a country, as a society, as a culture, if you will, around this. There's too many different factors. The opioid overdose crisis, the dying, as I want to say, each death of someone from a substance use disorder is complete tragedy to the family. But, as some horrible person in history once said, when you get thousands of deaths, they just become statistics, and you turn blind to them, and stakeholders and the partisanship in this country fighting all these other things, they just lose, the direction of doing anything. So, I go out, I talk to things like this. I mean, talk to people, say, we want a drug treatment court in our county. We think it can work, no matter how small. We're growing. We have 67 counties. We probably have, 55 of them have 50 of them have drug treatment courts. And one thing about a drug court, they'll always look the same wherever you go, because of the evidence-based practices.
Right. Megan, you said you would be
I
able
can
to
stay long if people have a question. You're the host. Maybe you don't want to stay long, but
No, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Real quick. So yeah, sure. I can address this question. So Nate asked what the criteria would be for enrolling in drug treatment court. Is it for anyone who commits a crime and has substance abuse problem or other criteria? So there is a very objective process that we go through. Someone would apply for the program. You can receive an application online. You can reach out to myself even. I'll make sure my contact information is shared in the chat. And once we receive an application, we will take it over from there. So you do have to have either open criminal charges here in Montgomery County, or you do have to have a probation or parole violation pending to be eligible legally for the program. And you do have to have a substance use disorder. Now, we do have some individuals who might have a substance use disorder along with a serious mental illness diagnosis, and that individual might be more appropriate for our behavioral health court. So usually what happens is if we get an application in through our that comprehensive clinical assessment, we really take a deeper dive to figure out what might be the appropriate court for that person because of the different types of services that could be put in place around them. So I will definitely put my email in the chat for anybody who'd like to reach out directly, and my phone number. Please don't ever hesitate to call. If you have questions, if you're in a situation, if you have a loved one who's on adult probation supervision and you need some support or some better understanding of the processing, or you have tried to reach out and haven't been able to get connected to anybody, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. But that was a very short way of answering it, but you're welcome to give me a call later or tomorrow if you'd like, and I can kind of give you a better step process through that.
Thank you, Megan. Wonderful. Well, this has been amazing. I really appreciate all of you being here, and I'm so glad that we have an opportunity to record this and share it with others who would like to learn more. But thank you all very, very much for your time. Great to see you again, Judge. Great to see you, Megan and Sam. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here, everybody.